Whenever we talk of budgets, we talk of outlays. But is there a way of thinking about government expenditure beyond the outlays? Because even when budget 2024 was announced, there was a big discussion on whether the allocations to defense are appropriate and whether the allocations to health, education, social sectors. So there's a big debate amongst commentators, amongst editorial writers on whether this is a growth budget or whether this is a budget with equity or whether this is a budget which focuses on national defense. But every discussion is about the budget. It is not about outcomes. It is not about what do you want from the budget, and we do not ever measure what has been the impact of the budgetary allocation in the previous years. For example, our general assumption is that the budgetary allocation would reflect government priority. But my submission is that sometimes a policy tweak can also bring about a major change. For example, if it is visa on arrival for foreign tourists, the civil aviation sector and the tourism sector would get a very big boost, and it is far more than enhanced budgetary allocations to that sector will make. So the other issue is, that given the fact that now the services in education, health, agriculture, and several other sectors can be provided by the markets also. So the market is also providing services, and the state is also providing services. Can we align our policies in a manner that the market forces can also reflect the top priorities of the government? Because one of the factors that I've noticed, I've put in 36 years in the government, is that all government reviews at all levels, whether it's a departmental review or it's a ministerial review or it's a parliamentary review, the main focus of government reviews is on what was the budget, was transparency followed in procurement, was the procedure followed, were the physical goods available? I mean, were they provided? And so the entire discussion is on this. It's on material objects, on whether things were done. But we do not spend adequate time in trying to reflect on what is the intended outcome. And then, of course, as bureaucrats and as administrators, we are all very scared of the three C's: the CBI, the CVC, and the post facto audit by the Comptroller and Auditor General, because many governance professionals feel that procedural compliance is as important as the substantive outcome, because substantive outcome, we haven't really laid down the performance parameters for outcomes, so it is difficult to monitor. Therefore, is there a way in which we can start looking at performance outcomes rather than the budgetary outlays? Because that is going to be the only way in which we can change the paradigm of governance. Let me elaborate. You see, there are some schemes which are so clear and so common and whose objectives are so clearly laid out that it is easy to implement, it's easy to monitor. Take, for example, a very successful scheme, the midday meal scheme in India. And, 115 million school children get a hot meal every day in India. And there are hardly any complaints, because if there is anything that goes wrong, it's going to be highlighted and it's going to have very strict action, because everybody is involved. The community is involved, the teachers are involved, the educators are involved, the students themselves would give a feedback if the food is not proper. Their parents would be involved. So the midday meal scheme in this country is doing very well. 115 million meals every day, every single school day. And yet, it is the same school system which, when it comes to learning outcomes, has not been able to do very well. As the annual State of Education report for the year 2023 tells us, that within the age group of 14 to 18, a lot of young kids cannot really read even the primary read up to class 5 in their mother tongues. They have a difficulty in arithmetic. I mean, they find it difficult to add and subtract, even though they've moved up the ladder, up the academic ladder. So the point is that while we have been very good at managing the midday meal scheme, We have not been successful insofar as learning outcomes is concerned. So, uh, can something be done? Has an effort been made? Have those efforts been successful? What is the expenditure on this thing? So let's today talk a little bit about the learning outcomes and the efforts which the governments have made in this direction. You know, starting from 2004, in fact, it was during the regime of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee that the government started this initiative of introducing ICT labs in schools, that is, information communication technology labs in schools. 1,20,000 schools have been supplied ICT equipment in the last 20 years. But after having supplied equipment to 1,20,000 schools, on ground, only 80,000 schools have a functional ICT lab. This means that 40,000 schools were provided equipment but could not set up their labs. But even where the labs were set up, the results were not great. And why were the results not great? The results were not great because the whole effort was on supplying equipment, and everyone was happy. I mean, the equipment supplier was happy because he supplied his equipment and he got his payment based on the delivery. The school felt it's an additional load, but they recorded the fact that yes, equipment has been supplied. They sent the report to the education directorate, and both the education directorate and the CM's office, they felt that yes, we've supplied this equipment, and therefore learning will take place automatically. But learning will not take place automatically because we've not made adequate provisions or adequate arrangements on what is going to be done with this ICT equipment. Is the ICT equipment meant to teach computers? Or is it meant to create a learning environment? Is ICT meant, can the presence of ICT leverage the understanding of science, technology, maths, remedial learning, subjects like geography, even history? So, can all this be taught through the ICT equipment? The answer is yes. But the fact is that we did not train teachers for this. We did not ensure adequate USPs for this. We did not provide learning material for this. And most importantly, there was no monitoring, there was no attempt to check on what is happening with this equipment that has been supplied. And it continued for quite some time till, and I must acknowledge the work of two brilliant secretaries of education in Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh. And this was Naveen Jain in Rajasthan and K. Sandhya Rani in Andhra Pradesh. They started questioning. They started asking, after all, why is this ICT equipment there in schools? Is it an end in itself, or is it the means to an end? How does it align with the new education policy? How will it help learning outcomes? Can we have something like a personalized adaptive learning approach? Can we have something like this? And they realize that yes, it is possible. We have the hardware, but now the software aspect of including or providing teachers who know about how to make use of this ICT equipment in general learning or in training some of the existing teachers for that. Now, that is something which was an aspect that had been ignored. Now, they reversed the thing. They said, as important as hardware is the motivation for the teachers, is their skill sets for the teachers so that they understand what the broader objective is. And because these two states did well in their learning outcomes, the Niti Aayog took this up as a challenge, as a pilot project in four of the aspirational districts, which is Fatehpur, Chandauli, Balrampur, and Sonbhadra in UP. And the Niti has gone one step further. And I would like to compliment the Niti for having, Niti Aayog for having done this. So they felt that, rather than rather than give the equipment supplier the payment on the supply of equipment, we will link it to learning outcomes, which means that the equipment supplier, his or her role does not end by the supply of equipment, but the equipment supplier must also engage with teachers, must engage with teachers learning, must engage with providing the software and the skills to ensure that students actually learn. And payment would be made only at the gap of an year or so, so that only when learning outcomes have been monitored, which means that in the first place you'll also have to monitor learning outcomes. Now this reversal, I won't use the word reversal, but this additionality of of trying to measure what is the learning outcome has made a world of a difference. And it has been seen that by engaging and by their involvement, the 2,500 teachers from grades 3 to 8, spread over 75,000 students, the real uh, progress in the learning outcomes of students has been observed in these four districts, which is a very important aspect. Now, therefore, what do we learn from this? What we learn from this is that it is not the establishment of the ICT lab alone. It is the interface of the ICT lab, of the technology, with the software, with the humanware, and by involvement of everybody, by involvement of stakeholders, that the learning outcomes will improve. Another aspect was that, so far the effort was on providing desktops, so that students could learn only while they were in school. I mean, the physical the physical asset had to be in the school. Now, this was again tweaked in the sense it was felt that rather than provide one desktop in an equivalent price, we can have many more laptops or many more tablets which the students could even take home and use. So the whole idea is to change the way we look at ICT equipment. ICT equipment is not an end in itself. ICT equipment is a means to an end. And we also have to address the larger ecosystem, because if an ecosystem can produce midday meal schemes flawlessly, the same ecosystem can also provide great learning outcomes, provided we are very clear in our minds as administrators, as governance professionals, on what is the intended outcome. This and only this is what will lead to a Viksit Bharat. But I'd like to compliment the Niti Aayog and the education secretaries of Rajasthan and Andhra Pradesh for having taken this forward step. And I hope that many more education secretaries, many more school administrators will start looking into this aspect. Thank you.